Hey, if you're looking to buy a business and use an SBA loan to do that, you may have heard that a seller note can replace your cash equity injection requirement with an SBA loan, but sometimes it may not count at all. And so today I'm going to walk you through exactly when a seller note and how a seller note needs to be structured in order for it to count as equity for an SBA loan. And I want to make sure that you don't waste your time coming to an agreement with the seller on a deal structure that isn't going to work for you from a equity injection requirement standpoint. Just a little bit of background. My name's Adam Hoeksema. I'm the owner of ProjectionHub. I was an SBA lender myself for 12 years, closed about 1,500 SBA loans. Now I own ProjectionHub, where we help folks create financial projections and business plans and ultimately walk them through the SBA process. One of the big things that I see in acquisition deals is the buyer may be a little bit short on cash for the equity injection. And so they are looking to meet that equity injection requirement through a seller note. So the SBA is going to require you, the SBA lender is going to require you to put in a 10% equity injection for a deal. So if you, let's just say you've got $1 million acquisition, you're going to need to come up with $100,000 at 10% as your equity injection. But if you structure a seller note correctly, you can have half of that 100,000 be taken care of by a seller note so that you would only have to put in 5% yourself as the buyer. So the way for a seller note to actually count as equity based on the newest SBA standard operating procedure here in 2025 is that the 5% seller note needs to be on full standby for the life of the loan. So the typical SBA acquisition loan is going to be 10 years, which means that you're not going to be able to pay, if it's on full standby, you're not going to be able to pay any interest or principal on that seller note until the end of that 10-year SBA loan, right? Or until the SBA loan's completely paid off, right? And so that might create some indigestion for the seller because they're saying, well, hey, at 10 years, who knows if I'll even be around in 10 years, right? I don't want to wait 10 years to get that final 5%. And then even at that point, are you going to pay that final 5% off over a period of time? So it may be 15 years before they get fully paid. But in order to get the deal to work from an equity injection standpoint, that might be the requirement that the seller is going to have to agree to. So the seller note is also subordinated behind the SBA loan from a collateral perspective. But if it meets those requirements, if it's on full standby and it's subordinated to the SBA loan, it can be counted towards the equity injection there for your deal. Now, one other thing to consider here is that you may have two seller notes. So I think this is probably the way that it most commonly would be structured is you might have two separate seller notes. One is for that 5% that's on full standby and you're not paying on that until the end of the SBA loan. You could have another seller note that you could start to pay on sooner. So let's say instead of, if it's $1 million purchase price, let's say you did a $800,000 SBA loan, so 80% financing with SBA, $100,000 seller note that you start paying on right away, another $50,000 seller note that's on full standby, can't touch that, can't pay it until the end of the SBA loan. And then that final 5%, the $50,000, is your equity injection cash that you are bringing to the table as the buyer. So that is possible. Sometimes folks get a little bit confused thinking if I have any sort of seller note, so if I might have a 30% seller note, do I have to put the whole thing on standby? No, you wouldn't have to. Not for it to count as equity injection. You would just need probably to separate that into two different seller notes. And the one that is going to be counted towards your equity injection is the part that's going to be on full standby. Now, all of that said, you need to still make sure that the deal cash flows with the proposed seller note. And so you need help kind of thinking through, hey, how does the debt service coverage ratio look on this deal based on the proposed SBA loan and the proposed seller notes? What does that look like? Feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out at support@ProjectionHub.com. Happy to take a look. We can kind of build out the model and review the deal structure and just make sure, hey, this looks like a structure that should work for an SBA lender and should cash flow meet your equity requirements and also satisfy the cash flow requirements that the bank would have. So happy to review your deal and give you some feedback on that. So feel free to reach out again at support@ProjectionHub.com. That's helpful. Thanks.